Well, good evening, folks. This is Dave Schmidt. I'm your host here again tonight on the Cosmic Connections. This is the June 9th program. And as you see, I've got a little different of a backdrop that I've been using for the last couple of weeks. But I am at my home here back in Florida versus where I was in Sedona last week, visiting some friends and some other issues that were going on there. But it's always nice to be back. And again, as always, we want to welcome Blanca. How are you doing this fine evening?
Doing very well, Dave. Thank you. It's been a rainy week over here, so we're getting our summer rain.
We haven't had any down here in Florida, so that's interesting. So you're getting it there, but we're not here. But it is.
Yes.
I have noticed, that the Florida heat and humidity is now starting to hit. It's getting up into the 90s, and it's very humid, and so kind of from mid-June up until around mid-September, it gets pretty hot and humid here. But it's fine. It just comes with the territory, and that's what it is, and I do fine with it. So. Yes, I was in Arizona in Sedona last week, and we had some problems with the sound again, and so that's why I didn't have Blanca on the program with us, and I just did a short video on my own. And but tonight I'm going to tie in on the program and just a general discussion that Blanca and I are going to have together on some of the things that, one of the reasons why I was there and some of the things that are developing there in my former hometown in Sedona with some individuals that are there. So, Blanca, is there anything else you would like to share with us before we get going on the program?
No, just that there's just so much happening, and I hope people are handling it well and not going into any worry or anxiety. And perhaps the discussion that we'll have today will, help some with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, folks, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I was up in the Atlanta area, and when we did the program, I was there with Blanca, so she was side by side, and I think this is either the first or the second time you've been able to see her on the program. And, a lot of people have said, Dave, it's always just you and then this wonderful voice that's in the background, but we never get to see who she is. So I have found another program that I'm going to be using that will bring Blanca on video as well. So we're going to test it through the next week. So probably next week you're going to see a little bit of different of a format. She will be at her home in the Atlanta area, and I'll be at my here in Florida, and we'll be able to use a program where we're both coming on together. And yes, you will still be able to contact us and talk with us. Now, the way it is now, you won't be able to do it over the telephone. You won't be able to call us on the phone with comments or questions, but you will be able to kind of just, there's a link on the program that you are observing. You'll have to be online on your computer, but who today doesn't have a smartphone that you can't get on the internet and watch Facebook on the internet on a phone? I mean, we almost all have smartphones now that can do that. So, but it's just kind of the next transition because it brings us all onto a single program. I'm not going to be running into the audio problems that I have had, and then you'll be able to have Blanca on there with us, and she just won't be faceless anymore. You get to see that wonderful smile along with those wonderful voice and comments as well. So yeah. So
You make it hard to resist with all those compliments, Dave.
yes, so thank you. Well, in fact, somebody just wrote on the Facebook, how did you and Blanca start working together? Well, it was
Wow.
almost 6 years ago when I had another lady that was co-hosting with me, and then that didn't work out, and so she went on her own way. And I had actually put out in the newsletter that I was looking for a new host, and then Blanca responded, and it just clicked. It just absolutely clicked. And so we tried it out, and ironically, the first time we met, it was only about 2 weeks later. I was doing a workshop in Atlanta, so in 2 weeks I was able to meet her face to face, and it's just always been absolutely wonderful ever since then. So yeah. Now, folks,
That's right. In fact, Alan was saying today, he said, it's really funny the way you and David ended up on the show together. And I go, I know. It was just when he announced, hey, I need a volunteer. And I thought, maybe I should volunteer.
yeah. So
This has
okay.
been nice. It's been nice. Yeah.
Now, folks, let me mention that those of you that are watching, you may see these little wisps going by. Okay, I admit, I'm burning some incense here, folks. That's what I've got going on, okay? So, and there is a reason that I do that. It's not just to smell nice. Uh, it's interesting. A.R. Borden had, and remember, I've always referred to him a lot, and he was the one that the Cordians referred to as the smartest and wisest man in the world. I should say the smartest man in the world. He was an absolute super genius. He was also a master remote viewer. He was one of the best remote viewers in the world. For a period of time, they had basically a remote viewers association, and he was the president of that. And so he, in being a master at remote viewing, what he had learned was when people are remote viewing, they are basically seeing energetically another position somewhere else in the spectrum. And he discovered that incense blocks the remote viewers from being able to see through. He says he never totally understood it, but he says the smoke that comes out of the incense creates an energetic block that remote viewers can't see through. And he continued working with that, and we're always talking and hearing about the burning of sage. That sage clears out the energy field in your environment. And what Borden also discovered is that the burning of sage basically blocks people who are trying to move negative energy into your environment. People who are, whether it's soothsayers, shamans or whatever, or demonic attackers or whatever, the burning of sage, again, the smoke that comes out of incense or sage, they create a block in the energetic field. And remember, these guys were PhD scientists who discovered all this stuff. So that's what I got. I got a little bit of that. I got a little bit of incense going on. So if you see these little wisps coming by, there's some right there, So that's what it is. That's on the camera. Okay? All right. Then Blanca, anything else before we get going on the program tonight?
Well, I just had an interesting visual that someone was like on Fox and said, "Hey, I'm burning sage." It was just fun. I mean, you can be really different on your own alternative media. I like it.
Yes, you can.
Be a little more human, but it just seems funny.
I can do whatever I want and say whatever I want on this program because
Exactly.
it's my program,
That's right.
And if Facebook
That's
doesn't
right.
like it, well, they can just take it and shove it. Yeah, they can just do that. So, and we can go back and listen to old Steve Stewart's song about "Take This Mask and Shove It." That I played
That's right.
I played that I can't think about a couple months ago. So, okay, well, in the program last week, I talked about how much it's so important for us to be understanding and waking up to the true essence of who we are as humans in this transition that we're going through, and that we as a human race are beginning to wake up. And they talk about, again, this comes back to Borden and others that say that we as a human race have basically, from hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were, our DNA was tampered with, and it put us in what is called a dumbed down, ignorant state to not being fully aware. But this is the era, this is the time that we're beginning to wake up, in so many words. Well, part of that waking up is making sure that we keep ourselves in a very, very high energy state. Now you come back to the basic foundation that everything in the universe is comprised of energy. We are energy-based beings, but energy has different frequencies and vibrations. And so we can be operating in high vibrations or low vibrations. And when you're in high vibrations, it's when you're more awake, you're more aware, you're more alert, you're more in tune. And when you're in low vibration states, your whole awareness and senses begins to diminish or even shut down. And the number one thing that will lower your energy and shut your perception down more than anything else is fear. Fear is the greatest enemy to our soul, is what it is. Now, last week, when I was in Sedona, I visited a wonderful, wonderful dear friend of mine because We were housemates. We lived in the same house together for over 6 years. And her name is Penny, and I'm just going to give her first name. Those that all know me, they know who she is, but I think it's best. I don't want to create problems, but going beyond that. It was about 3 or 4 months ago that Penny came down with some serious sicknesses and some blood issues. And she was having to go in and have some blood therapy work, needing transfusions. And it was about 3 weeks ago that she had become diagnosed with acute leukemia. And so she wasn't doing well. She couldn't have any visitors. She had to keep herself in a very safe, non in a very safe environment where there weren't any diseases, infections, or germs, or any of that kind of stuff that would come into her area. I did communicate with her, and I said, "My dear friend," says, "I really do want to see if it's possible to stop in and visit with you." And she said, "Let me see what I can do." And so she made arrangements, and that my friend that was with me, and we went in and we spent some time with her. I could tell that she was very weak, but she was still alert and aware. And we got into a very good discussion, and she was always my best dear friend and confidant. I mean, when I would have stuff coming through, I'd always run it by her, and she would always, give me kind of a thumbs up, or I don't think that's too good. And I could share anything with her because she was basically the one that I would run stuff by just to verify stuff, or how do you feel about this? And we lived in the same house, and we were very, very close friends. And she has written a book about how we process past lives and the whole issue of reincarnation. And it was in my time with her, and she was a master at this. She was an absolute master at helping people understand some of their past lives. And she has this chart of what she referred to, what was called the Magdalene family. And ended up being over 500 people that she had diagnosed, that we were all together in a past life there with Jesus and Mary Magdalene in Palestine and Jerusalem during that period of time. We were all there in that time at one point or another. And she always talked about this is the awakening, or this was what was called the emergence of the Magdalene family. Very high, powerful, conscious, awake people that all came together during that period of time in that location on our planet to help bring forward a new, positive, loving energy for the world. And it was all of us that were there together that basically was the assistance in Jesus becoming who he was and everything he had to do. Because when you read his autobiography book, you'll see that he didn't do this all by himself. Well, and ironically, when I was with Penny, and she talks about it in the book, that she had written. There's about 5 pages in there that she has about us together, and she said we had 10 past lifetimes together. So basically, that she was a soul connection with me. Well, she was doing somewhat okay, and then she was still very weak, not doing well. And then I got a call 3 days ago. She had an absolute turn for the worse. She came very, very close to fading out. They rushed her to the hospital. She was in ICU, in intensive care, for 2 days. And she has got to the point where she's now in basically total 24-hour health care. And they're basically saying they're not certain that she's going to be able to make it much longer. And her family has come out from New Mexico to be with her there in Arizona. But again, when I was with her last week, I said, my good friend, this is serious. Very acute, serious leukemia. I mean, people don't always make it through that. And I said, are you ready to move on? Are you ready to go through your transition? And she looked right back at me and had this wonderful, peaceful look. And she says, I am. She says, I have absolutely no fear of death. I have absolutely no fear of what the world calls dying, because I understand and I know there is no such thing as death. It's just a transition that we all go through from one incarnation to another. And if this is my time, I'm ready to go. And then she came back and she said, in fact, I've been on this chemotherapy for 3 months and I hate this stuff. she says, I would rather just go ahead and transition than have to be on chemotherapy for another 4 to 6 months. And she came around and said that. It was very peaceful. So she's not doing well now from the physical perspective. But I was able to talk with my other friend Jamie, and Jamie had talked with Penny's sister, because Penny's sister had come out from New Mexico to be there to take care of stuff, and if necessary to move in to being the executor of all of her affairs should Penny go through the transition. And she said that Penny was, for a little bit, was kind of awake and alert, and had shared with her sister that my friend being there had been the highlight of her last 2 weeks. And that's probably why she was looking a little better, because instead of, not doing real well. But, the soul that we all have knows when it's time for us to go through our transitions. I've read a number of different sources that say the soul has already, in essence, predetermined what we would call its death date, or the body transitioning date. And if you notice through all of this, I'm using the word transition. I'm very rarely using the word death or dying. Now, how does all of this tie in? The fear of dying, the fear of death, as it is portrayed to us in our culture, in our world, is one of the greatest fears that humanity has. You think it isn't a fear-based thing? Look at Hollywood, look at movies, look at dramas, look at TV shows, how they portray death. Always extremely negative, extremely fear-based. That is what you see is what is called the domination of the dark side of our world to keep us in fear, to keep us in fear. But as we wake up, as we go through our own ascension process and we become aware of the truth instead of this holographic illusionary world, we realize there is absolutely nothing to fear. All we're doing is going through a transition, because the soul never dies. The soul continues to go on. We're going through a transition. I was sharing this with a friend, and they said, this is something kind of like what Penny probably would have said, is that, my soul has been going through this expansion and this growth. And, well, let me take a step back. A.R. Borden and Neruda, in their writings, referred to that the body is basically what they would call the human uniform. It's a uniform that the soul puts on to cover itself in this and to take itself through this physical world that we live in. But in the higher dimensions, the body's just a temporary covering, is all that it is, that we place ourselves into to be able to move and operate in what we call a physical world. So as the body being a uniform, I mean, I can imagine my wonderful, wonderful friend Penny saying this, is that, my soul has been going through frequent expansion and growth in my own awareness and consciousness. And I think my soul has outgrown this body, and it's time to go get a new one. And when I heard that, and a friend had shared that with me, I thought, yeah, that's what we go through. It's just a time of a transition, because our job as humans is to always be working in our growth and our transition and moving out of fear and moving into strength. And the soul continues to grow and to expand, and sometimes it gets to where this body, this uniform, we outgrow the uniform. And it's time to go in and transition into a new one. And that's what we do. And we continue to do that because, remember, in terms of reincarnation, there is no real such thing as time. Einstein himself said, time is an illusion. There is no real such thing as time. We think in terms of time being linear, but he says in reality, you need to look at time being vertical. All past, present, future is happening simultaneously. Now, let me give a little bit of a background on this whole history around reincarnation. Now, if you remember, I had a master's degree in biblical studies, so I understood my Bible very well. I understand the history of how it came together, and I understand what was developing around that period of time. It was starting at around 325 A.D. that the Emperor Constantine had put a group of people together to basically decide, and brought in a bunch of bishops to decide what was going to be, quote, the religious documents for these groups called Christian. And also at that time, Constantine brought Christianity in as the official religion of the Roman government. Well, what happened there? Why did that happen? What he was noticing, that there were these group of people. Now, they did not go by the term Christians at that time. They were basically called people of the way. And they were growing in strength and in magnitude, and they were creating serious concerns for him and the Roman Empire. Why? Because there would be military skirmishes with them, and what he noticed is that they had absolutely no fear of dying. None. Why? Two reasons. They firmly believed in reincarnation, that dying was just a transition. That's all that it was. Secondly, they had a very, very strong faith in the resurrection of Jesus and understood that they could go through that themselves, so that they knew that dying, what we call physical dying, was just a transitionary state, is all that it was. And what Constantine had said is, how do you militarily defeat a group and an organization of soldiers that when you kill one, two of them come right behind him with absolutely no fear of death? How do you defeat them? And so he realized militarily this group of people were starting to have a very strong threat to what was the Roman throne, the Roman government at that time, the Roman Empire. So what Constantine did, he took Christianity, made it become the official religion of Rome, so that he could begin to dictate what was official doctrine of early Christianity. He was the one, he and others, formed the group of the bishops that formed what was today was our Bible, what was going to be in it and what was going to be left out. But there was one other thing that he did. He established a decree that it was against the Roman Empire and the Roman law to confess and believe in reincarnation. And he said anybody who confesses believing in reincarnation will immediately be put to death, i.e. crucified, just as the Lord Jesus that you're confessing to believe in. What did this do? The fear of death. So it created this ominous, very strong fear throughout the whole Roman Empire about believing and talking about reincarnation. And even till today, 1800 years later, we're still seeing the impacts of that, because our Western culture, which it's still based on a Judeo-Christian ethic faith of its value system, there's still very large parts of it that does not believe and understand in reincarnation. Yet, you go outside of the three Abrahamic-based religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because all three of those trace their roots back to Abraham, the Abraham of the Bible. Outside of that, there has always been evidence that all other religious faith systems and indigenous cultures all around the world have always understood and believed in reincarnation. It's only been, what is called westernized religion, or I should say Abrahamic-based religions, since the time of Constantine, where that has not been a belief system. And it was because of the fear issue. So again, it shows the control and the domination of fear. How we let fear dictate our beliefs, we allow fear to dictate our lives, and we allow fear to hold us down where we never get to the point of truly waking up and understanding the true identity of who we are as soul-based, spiritual-based beings. We are basically spiritual beings who put on a temporary uniform, a body, as to assist us in how we experience being in this lower dimensional, third dimensional world that we live in. So this week has been a week, yes, there is moments of grief when you have a very, very good close friend or a family member that you know is on their way out, or they do transition, that yes, they die, if that's the term we want to use. There is grief, and the grief is real, and the grief is normal, but the grief is the expression, it's the expression of the love and the compassion that you had toward that person when we experience that, because it's a loss. And it will be a loss. She won't be there for me to pick up the phone and call as my confidant that I've been able to do for so many years, and that good close friendship that we have. She won't be there in that capacity anymore. But I still understand, as I awaken and expand my own awareness and consciousness, I'll be able to have that intuitive connections with her. That doesn't go away. It's kind of like family members or spouses where one dies. They still have this, and they were deeply in love with each other. They just still have this deep intuitive connection with them. It's almost like there's this intuitive sensations that come through when they're still giving guidance, advice, care, and love. That's very normal, folks. It's not abnormal, and it's okay for us to transition into that type of understanding and belief system. So this week, as we're moving into the issues again of the currency exchange, and I've talked about what is the real reason, my understanding is that the primary reasons for the money coming through. It's about allowing us to be independently wealthy. Independently means where you don't have to work that 40 to 60 hour a week job anymore and be a slave for someone else to become wealthy at your expense of your labor and work. You're free from that. And you're now free to have the time to do the work and to learn about who we truly are as a human race, and to go through our expansion in consciousness, to redevelop what we think and what we believe, because that takes time and it takes work to do those. And if we're slaves to our jobs, that's usually time that we don't have to do that work. That's the real essence of the money coming forward. It's designed to be a tool to assist us in this era of expansion that we are going through. So, with that, Blanca, my dear friend, why don't you come on in and share some of your thoughts here?
Well, it's a sobering topic. It's a serious topic, and I think you handled it gracefully and positively. But the main current is, I think, and it's a theme that we've carried for many shows, and you have, and in your workshops. The main thrust of it is that we are owners of our vibration, and we are owners of our frequency all the way to the time of transition. And interestingly, if indeed we learn to manage our frequency to the highest level possible, it will make the transition a glorious experience. And so, again, many people have heard us talk about this, but for newer listeners, sometimes they may say, well, we hear people say raise vibration, raise frequency. What does that really mean? And a real easy way to understand it, and Dave alluded to it, it's an energy. We have an energy as spiritual beings or soul beings, whichever language speaks to you. And this energy we can manage in different directions, because you can have very, very strong fears. So that's energy with a label called fear through a filter called fear. But that same energy can be labeled love.
Yes.
or compassion. So I think that's something that you're trying to express to people in terms of that we can actually manage this emotional energy flow. Now, like you say, the programmers, the controllers, they want to manage that flow for us. That's why they show the programs that they show, have the false flags that they have, put pandemics and scamdemics in our experience because they want that energy flow in fear because it's to their advantage. And I know you can riff on why they want us to be in fear.
Yeah. There's a couple of reasons why they want us in fear. On a practical basis, people are very easy to have power and control over when they're based in fear. They're not thinking for themselves. They're not in what I would call their strong cognitive right mind. They're in a fearful mind, and they're then reacting to the controllers over them. And then there are others that say this. The Palladians say this, Borden says this, Neruda says this, is that there are what we would call dark hat, dark ET races that are out there in our world, and they feed off of our fear. See, they don't, because they're multidimensional, they don't feed off of physical food like we do. Their food is energy, the energy waves that are put out. And because they are lower dimensional, lower energy based themselves, they feed off of low based energy. So they are manipulating or assisting in creating fearful events for us in our world, and that's what they feed off of. I was sharing with a person today is that we are right now in what I understand of the modern, I should say the current era of human history. This is the first time that we have had a single event that has put the whole planet, the whole world into fear at the same time, and that's the COVID scenario. COVID is creating fear all around the world at the same time, and we have never had that happen before. Usually it's catastrophes, wars, or something of that nature that creates fear, but they're isolated to certain geographic areas, not the whole world at the same time. Because we now live in a world where we can have simultaneous communication all around the world. And so the whole world reacts to this issue. And what a powerful opportunity for dark hat controllers to put the world into fear, but to create this virus that is supposed to be killing and making everybody die. I won't go into that anymore beyond that, but you get the point where I'm coming from. They want the fear.
It's exactly correct.
Yeah.
It's exactly correct. And it's you can look at we'll just kind of separate ourselves from this with no judgment because we probably all fell in various scales of this. But you can see the people who were really screaming at other people for not wearing their masks.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't coming from any logical consideration. It was
No.
fear. And so that was a product of the program. Now, there's still people that even though they're vaccinated, they still wear their mask. Even though CDC has said you don't have to wear your mask if you're vaccinated, you can't catch it if you're outside, they still wear their mask. Now, if you ask them why, they'll say anything from I'm comfortable with it, or I got used to it, or I just feel better. But my opinion is that they're just afraid to take it. They've gotten so used to it, or the program of fear penetrated them so deeply that they're actually afraid to take it off.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. So, but folks, it's our time as a human race to rise above fear, to not live in fear, to learn how to overcome fear, to move beyond fear. You've heard me say this in the past, and it took work for me to do this, but I am now at a point in my life, it's extremely rare for me to have a bout in fear. It's extremely rare. If fear comes into my life, I can almost immediately recognize it and dismiss it and let it go. Now, that takes a reprogramming in what it does. It takes a reprogramming of how we have programmed ourselves from our past to react to fear by certain based events. But you overcome the fear by, number one, you have to be willing to recognize it when it's coming at you. And fear is felt before it is seen or experienced. You will feel it first. So get to recognize the feeling of fear. And then when that happens, then you stop. You stop whatever you are doing. You take control of your thoughts and you say to yourself, I do not have to be fear-based. I have nothing to be fearful of. And then you just basically, what I did, I talked to the fear and I says, you're not welcome here. I'm not going to allow you to be a part of my life. Fear is no longer going to be a part of my life. And you're go away, be gone. You're not here. And because I was what helped me wake up to that was recognizing how much fear was keeping me from accomplishing everything I felt I was capable of accomplishing. If I wanted to make some transition or change in my life to improve some things, I found myself that fear was what was stopping me. Because something would come up and I would get afraid and I said, I don't know if I can do that, but I then became awake to the fact that I was being dominated by fear in certain areas of my life. Now that was years ago. That was about 12, 13 years ago I started that process, but I am at that point. It's extremely rare for me to experience fear. And that has been probably one of the biggest shifts and changes in my life. And I think that is why I can do for you and have the ability to do for you what is coming our way in the currency exchange. Now, if you remember, you've heard me say, I've had 2 assassination attempts in my life. 2. Folks, I really don't give a rip about that. And I could say something else there. I don't care. I have no fear around that issue. So I know I've got cabal people who would like to take me out. I've got cabal people who want to shut me down. I've got cabal people who want to basically immobilize me or whatever it could be, but I have no fear. And because I have no fear, it stops their energy from impacting me because I rise above it. I keep my energy strong and rising above their lower energy that they're attempting to bring into my life. And if you want to use another analogy, the lower energy is darkness and the higher energy is light. And light always, always, always overcomes darkness. That's the law of the universe. It always does. So it's a matter of keeping ourselves in a high vibration, in a high light, and then that diffuses any of the negative energy that is attempting to come at us or the fear that is attempting to come our way. And it helps us learn how to overcome it where we don't have to deal with it anymore. Okay, Blanca, back to you.
Well, no, it's well said. And one of the things that we can learn if we want to be free, and most people, especially Americans, but I think more globally too, as people are waking up all over the world, is we're starting to treasure freedom, but we realize that freedom is really an attitude, and it's a state of mind, and it's an emotional state. And freedom can be anything from, the freedom to live where we want to live or believe what we want to live, or it can be the freedom of deciding what sort of emotional state do we want to live in. And so we actually have the freedom to choose higher states of being.
Yeah.
So we do not have to be prisoners of our fear or prisoners of our worry or prisoners of our anxiety. We can choose to be free of them. Now, if the prison door is open and we don't walk through, then we're going to stay in prison. So that's the work that you and I have been talking about. And there's a lot of books and a lot of different ways to start working to step out of that cage of our own negative attitudes or our own negative emotion or our own negative states. Now, for some reason, and there's a lot, everything from, like Dave says, tampering with our DNA and other things, more in the Christian language, the devil. For some reason, humanity is set at a negative state. It's just a default setting. Fortunately, with the higher energies that are coming through, that's loosening up a little bit. And also, the matrix, or like you say, the holographic illusion, is programmed in the negative frequency. That's why people say, oh, the world's awful, etc. Yeah, but that's the program. That's the set point. All right? But fortunately for human beings, that is not our natural state. You see, we're just programmed to be that way. It's the shows we watch, the news we watch, the magazines, the movies, the way we're raised, the school, etc. It just reinforces that illusion that we have to be in negative states of fear or anger, etc. Well, we can walk out of that state, but it does take effort. It doesn't come automatically. And as Dave said, and it is very, very true, there's an energy that starts coursing through you, and you're just used to labeling it fear or anger or whatever is kind of your default setting. I know I had a pretty short fuse, and Alan will say it's still there, but I don't light it up as quickly as I used to. The energy would come out as anger or impatience, and after I learned that that's a default automatic reaction, I learned to set that aside, to not automatically react that way. And so it takes work, but it is a certain freedom once you understand that you do not have to live in those negative states or negative frequencies.
Yeah, good. Okay, so do you think it's time for us to see if anybody would like to call in and with some questions or comments? Is this a good time to do that? I think it is.
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
yes.
So folks, for any of you that would like to call in and you have any questions or comments, the number is 515-605-9356. Again, that's 515-605-9356. Press 1 on your touch-tone phone and that'll let us know that you would like to come on the air. And right now we don't have anybody, so if anybody wants to do this, you'll be the first one to come up. And but other than that, I think if nobody wants to come up in about the next 30 seconds to a minute, Blanca, I might be ready to call it an evening.
Okay. The only thing I would like to say too is perhaps now, since you mentioned Penny and she was the inspiration for the discussion about freedom to choose states that don't involve fear and the freedom to embrace our transition. Perhaps we should all take a moment to just send her our love.
Yes.
And hopes for a beautiful transition for her if that's the time. And maybe we just pause for that.
Let's do that. If you folks, if you'd like to join me, let's just take probably about a short 10-15 seconds just to pause and send our love and our focus and our energy. Just send it out to Penny and Sedona. That's what you got to do. Thank you. All I want to know is that for all of you that are out there, wonderful, wonderful people that are so supportive of what I have been doing here, she's been the strength that was behind all that for me for all those years. She's the one that helped me keep going when I was doubtful, when I wasn't certain, when I didn't know. She always had that wonderful grace to just be there with support and encouragement for me. So, yeah. Let me just give a really, really brief update on the whole thing on the currency exchange. Folks, I haven't had anything new in the last week. It's still the same scenario that we are being told that it's a joint decision with representatives in the governments between China and the United States. China is saying yes, and the United States is saying not yet. They are saying that there's an event that needs to take place, but nobody is leaking what the event is or when it's going to happen. I know some of you have been sending me emails that says, "Well, do you think it could be this or do you think it could be that?" Folks, I have no idea, because anything I try to say would just be pure speculation. So don't even ask, okay, about what is the event and when. But all I know is that it's very solid. Again, just yesterday I was in touch with the other individual that's in touch with all of the funding sources at the very, very top, and she is saying the same thing, is that it's right there. But we don't know, because sometimes some things do come up that create the delays. So don't go putting, all your horses in that basket thinking it's going to happen, because we just don't know. But that's the update. That's what's happening there. And again, I come back to says that how I'm totally assured that it's very real. Folks, I wouldn't be here. I don't want to play this game if I wasn't convinced that this was real, what we're in with the whole currency exchange scenario. So thank you for understanding it. And that is pretty much what we had there. And I didn't see anybody want to call in. Blanca, did you? Hello? Are you there, Blanca?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Somehow it got muted.
Oh,
Sorry
okay.
about
Yeah,
that.
I haven't seen anybody. I haven't seen anybody, call in. So, yeah. Folks, just a reminder, we're probably going to have a different format in the program next week. There's a very high probability we won't be using Blog Talk Radio, so all the communication will have to be over the internet for you. But we'll take a look at it. I'll still work it through some as we try to test out the program over the week. So, Blanca, anything else you want to share with us before we're ready to go?
No, I think we said our fill.
Okay. Thank you, folks, for joining us here this week. And we will see you next week again on the Cosmic Connections. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye.